Okay, welcome back to your next tutorial. In this tutorial, excuse me, I'm going to show you how we need to arrange the parts that are currently in your design here so that we can then send them to the 3D printer and then manipulate those parts in the 3D printer so that we can print them successfully. So stage one is to first of all to combine all of these parts into one new component so that the 3D printer doesn't see them as separate pieces but as one part. I've tried printing them as separate pieces, but we get lots of failures. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is to notice that I've got probably about 6 or 7 different parts that I need to combine. And I need to be able to select each of the parts fairly readily with my mouse. So what I'm going to do is turn it to top view. So I'm looking directly down on top and I can easily select each part individually. The tool we use to make it all into one is called Combine. So if you come up to the Modify tab and scroll down about halfway, you've got Combine. Okay, a little dialog box pops up and it's saying where's the target body and then which of the bodies that wish to join to it. It doesn't really matter what order you do these in, but I'm going to make my target body the brake rotor. I'm just going to select it like so. You'll see that it's stored there, and now it's looking for what they call the tool bodies. So now I'm going to hover my mouse over the other parts. I'm going to start with these small wheel nuts, and you'll see as I click onto them, it stores them up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'm going to choose the rim itself, 5. Then I'm going to choose the tire, 6. And if I spin that sideways, oh, is it going to let me do it? No, okay, while they're still selected, I'm going to have to hit join. Sorry, hit OK. Oh, make sure the operation is on join, and we're going to create a new component, so make sure you've got that checked. You can leave Keep Tools unchecked. Click OK, and then what should happen is you'll see the whole part turn all into one color, into gray. Remember, if it doesn't have separate colors, you use that toggling component there. And you can see that here we've got a new component created. So what I might do at that point is, I don't know, I'll call this one all in one. That'll do. I'm not going to put that into a drawing or anything, so therefore I'll just leave it called like so. All right, so let me just deselect that, and then I should be able to hopefully, no, it's not being very nice to me. Oh, there we go, I can zoom things around a little bit, and you can see it's all that one color now, all the same part. All right, so now what you need to do, if you haven't already, is to download Flash Print or Flashforge driver program from self-service. You see the icon there in the bottom. So go to self-service. Within self-service, I think if you did a search for Flash, I think it'll probably come up. It's up here. Let's type in Flash. There it is there, Flash Print Dreamer, and click on install. And we need this to be installed before we go to the next stage, because what happens is that Fusion will try to send the 3D part that we want to print straight to the Flashforge Inventor program. So you've already got to have it downloaded. Once you've downloaded it and you've opened it up and make sure that it actually opens the program, then you can go to this next stage. The next stage is to come up to this make icon up here, click onto the arrow, and you've got a couple of different options: 3D print, get a quote, get parts, and so on. Well, we just want to go to 3D print, and this dialog box appears. It's asking for, first of all, to select what you want to send to the 3D printer. So I'm going to obviously select that, and you'll see it then basically it selects the whole thing, and a little watch pops up because it's triangulating every single surface. Now you can see the millions of triangles that it's actually created. So it's created a mesh over the entire surface that the 3D printer will then understand. You can see there 375,000 triangles. I always set it at high You could, I don't know what custom even is, but high seems to work pretty well on our printers. Output, send a 3D printer. Print utility, I think you need to set that to custom. And then the last one from the list here is the application flash print. If that's not already there, you may need to go find that. Oh, that's what you've got to do. You got to click onto that, then go to applications and go find it. There it is, there, flash print. So that's why you need to have installed it beforehand and maybe try running it once. Okay, so once you've got all that in the dialog box, simply click on OK. What it will do then, it will then open up Flash Print and it will then insert the file into the printer. Now I'm going to zoom out, after I've said yes to this. I'm going to zoom out with my mouse, and as you can see, it's massive. So it's a scale of 1:1, and down in there somewhere is the actual, what do you call the printing envelope, I suppose. So the first thing I'm going to do is reduce this down to a quarter of its size. So you can see we've got some tools on the left here. So I'm going to click on scale and click on the whole object, come back and click on scale again. And if you set the scale percentage here, instead of it being 100%, if you set that to 25, and then if you hit the enter key, it will then make the others 25 and scale the whole thing down on its X, Y, and Z axis in proportion, or uniform, I should say. So what we might do is then have a look, and you can see here this rectangle represents the 3D printing bed that we've got to work with. And what we're going to do is cut this thing in half and then position it on the table so it'll print it with the least amount of support material. So a couple of things to realize is we want this to be in the center of, well, we want the piece once it's cut in half to be in the center. So let's cut it in half first. Okay. So once it jump out of the scale command, click onto cut, click onto the object, go to cut again. And then you can see here it says direction with mouse, X, Y, or Z plane. Click on X plane and you'll see you've got a plane appearing in an X-axis going right through the center of your object. If that's the one you want, good. If you want to cut the other way, you just change it from X to Y, and then you could also change it to Z. And you can control the heights and the positions of those planes like so. But we just want to cut this thing in half like so. So once it's positioned, and it'll default to the center of the object, then click on Start Cut, and you'll see it then breaks it into two. I'm going to get rid of 1/2 of this. So I'm going to click onto 1/2. While I'm still in cut, it doesn't really matter. Come up to Edit, and then hit Delete. All right, so we've cut it, but now we need to reposition it so the large flat section there is actually facing down on top of the bed of the 3D printer here. A couple of things you need to know is how to move the camera and also how to move the object on the table. Whenever you want to move the object, you must be in the move mode. So you've got to select move, you've got to select the object, go back to move again, and then you can manually move your object around. Now you can see these red walls appear, and the red walls are showing that the object is placed outside of the extents of the 3D printer's capabilities. So it has to be within inside those walls without making them go red. Two things in the move command. You've got on platform, which means it moves the object down so it's touching the bed of the 3D printer. And center is quite handy. Obviously, it's putting it right dead center in the middle of everything. Let's get out of move, and then let's go to view. So click on view, and if you click on view again, we've got different viewing options. Top view, bottom view, right, left side, you name it, they're all there. If you want to go back to that 3D view, you just hit reset, and it takes you back to that default view. So you find yourself having to click in and out of these different tools quite a bit, and you'll get the hang of it after a little while. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to rotate this thing over and around. So that's in the move, so it's in the rotate command, I should say. So I'm just going to close the set one, come down to rotate, And you can see straight away you've got these orbs or circles going around which give you the 3 axes. Click on rotate again, and by then clicking on to the positive or negative boxes, you can then see what it does in the different directions. Not quite what I was after, so I'm just going to go back to the beginning, and that's the correct orientation, but you see that it's actually gone through the bottom of the table. So I'm going to jump out of rotation, go back to move, and then click on platform and center. And then I might also rotate the thing on the bed so it's more parallel with the long axis of this bed as well. So once again, click on rotate again. Is it the Z? It is the Z axis. I've clicked on that one, and you can see it's now spun it around like so. The reason I've put it in this position is it probably will use the least amount of support material to actually print it. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go back to move, make sure it's on platform and center. Then I go back to view. Now while I'm with the view icon highlighted, if I hold shift, hold shift and I use my left mouse, I can then dynamically zoom and pan around my object to have a look at it. Now just got to remember that the only time you can do that is when you're in the actual view mode. All right, so that's the first part, is getting it to the correct scale, cutting it in half, and then getting it in the correct position, ready now to add some support material. So as this thing prints, it obviously has some undercuts or some overhangs, which it'll need to print support in between some of these parts. It's a very clever program that works out the minimal amount of support material it's going to need. So if you then leave these icons alone for a while, and then come up here to the load, support and prints, you click on supports, and you've got some defaults to set up for your support options. So for this particular project, I found these settings to work well. When it says support types, choose tree-like. Don't use linear, it just looks at a whole bunch of lines, straight lines I should say. Overhang threshold 30% seems to work quite well. The post diameter of 3, the base diameter of 6, and base height of 5. So just replicate those settings for your support options and click OK. Then you come up to this one that says auto supports, and then the computer will then survey what you've got on the table, and it will work out the best way to add support material so that when your printer is printing, it always has something to print on top of. All right, so click OK. And I'm just going to have a look at that. So to have a look at that and look around the back of it and so on, you need to get out of this mode. So click on back. And you can see here we're now back in here. It's prompted us to say, do you want to save these supports to this file? Well, we'll say yes. It'll then prompt you for a name. I'm going to call mine, what will I call mine? Rim 25, because it's 25% of its original size, and it's a half. That'll do, because it's half the rim. Click on save. Now back here, because I'm in view, if I held in my shift key, my left mouse button, I can turn myself around. And you can see here, these are these trees. I'll zoom in, sorry. These are these trees that I'm talking about. And you can see how they attach themselves or build themselves and give the printer something to print on for these large overhangs here. That's not looking too bad actually. Most of that will come off pretty easily after we've finished printing. So I'm pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is go to the next stage where I'm going to tell it to do what we call the G code or the tool pathing for the actual print. So we're going to jump out of here. But before we do that, there's one last thing I didn't tell you, was you can also choose which extruder you want to use on the 3D printer. It always defaults to using the right extruder. So in the 3D printer, there's two nozzles, if you like. There's a right one and a left. And what you'll have to do is when you go to the printer that you want to use, you just need to check to make sure that the spool that feeds the extruder on the right is full or has a lot of PLL plastic on the spool left. If not, you'll have to go back to this stage and click on use the left extruder. When you click on use left, it just changes it to a different color so that the program knows to select the left extruder. So I'm just going to leave it on use right extruder for these purposes. All right, so let's go to print. So click on print here, and these settings should be pretty standard when you've downloaded Flashforge. The only thing that won't be standard is this first layer height here. I think it sets it at 0.25 or something. Can I get you to click on the up arrow here until it says 0.40? Everything else should pretty much be defaulted. If you wanted to, you could check out what all these things here mean. Basically, if you click on perimeter, yeah, look, infill, what's the shape going to be? It's a hexagonal infill rather than triangles or something. What's the density of the fill? At the moment that's 15, so it's pretty sparse inside. If you wanted something, you know, solid, you'd have to crank that right up to like 100%, but we're going to leave it at 15. Supports and rafts and all sorts of stuff. Look, don't worry too much about that. Let's just click on OK. Here, it's going to ask you, do you want to put a raft, a brim, or ignore? Basically, what a raft does, it prints, what would you call it, a base for everything to print upon. I found the rafts are really difficult to remove, so maybe just the brim, and I'll show you what happens. So once you've clicked on that, it's now saying, okay, save this file as a .gx file. And this is the actual file that gets sent to the printer. This is like the G codes, the X, Y, and Z movements that it needs to know. It's got the same name. It's going to the same folder, and just click on save. And you can see here it's now calculating the toolpath, depending on how complex your model is, depending on how long that takes. And then once that's finished, you'll then see we'll get a preview of all the different layers that it's going to create. And it's taking a little while. There's a fair bit of complex geometry in there. Okay, almost finished. And there we go. Now you can see here what it's done with that brim. It's added a small thin layer around the outside of the object and also around the outside of the posts so that these don't break off and fail when we print. So the brim's not a bad idea. If you look on the left here, you've got 401 layers, and if you grab that little button, you can actually pull down and see what's being printed, all the different layers. So that's exactly what the printer is actually doing, except from it's doing it from the bottom up. So it starts on nothing, and then it puts these layers down, and it keeps on building up like so. You can see the hexagonal infill in there inside. So it's not solid, so it's saving material. Yeah, you get the idea. We're going to have to break out all of that purple stuff by hand later on. So it's always good to do a visual test to see what's inside, I suppose. Okay, at that point there, you then click on print, and you then connect it via the USB to the actual printer. You hit rescan, it'll find the actual printer, 3D printer I should say. It'll come up here, and then it hit connect, and that's it. It then starts downloading the file to the printer, and the printer then will start up automatically. All right, that was a fair bit, but that's how you then take your object from Fusion 360 through to the 3D printer.